Now,
Living in a great big way.
one more, boy.
Living in a great big way. Louis.
Hi and welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining my Paint With Me tutorials here on Substack. My name is Mary and I'm so glad to be joining you today and continuing my series on introducing you to the basics of using watercolor. And I've been going through a series of things that I think are foundational for your watercolor journey. I'm trying to give you the tools so that you can get started and begin painting on your own and really enjoying the medium. So today I want to teach you about using value with watercolor. And value is what creates light and mood and drama and feeling and interest and depth in a painting. So it's really, really important. And we're going to be looking at some paintings by a painter named Paul Cezanne. And here's just an example of a beautiful painting. He was pretty famous for his landscapes, but I just love when he paints fruit and his still lifes. If you can see this one, I'm going to show you another one soon, but you can see that each piece of fruit does not have the same value. There are areas of the fruit that are dark, and there's areas of this goblet fruit bowl here that's dark, and he's used color in such a way to show this great variation in value and to show that where the light is coming from in this room. And it looks like it's coming from this direction, right? And it's creating all these shadows. And this is one of the elements that really makes paintings interesting. And that'll be really important as you begin to paint more complicated compositions. So today I'm going to show you 3 ways that you can create value with watercolor. Before we get started, I wanted to show you this beautiful, gorgeous painting by Cezanne of some apples. And I just wanted to show you, if you kind of look at this painting, you see that he has the light coming from this direction, and then his shadows are falling on this side. And the way he does that, I want to zoom in on see this apple right here. I want you to see the amazing amount of colors that he got in this one piece of fruit. I see bluish purple tones back here. We've got like an orangey brown. It's definitely got yellows. He's got these spots of gorgeous pink, light pink, dark pink, this tangerine kind of orange. We've got a yellowy greenish orange here. Oh my goodness, just like one area of this painting is amazing. I just want you to see these different spots of color and how much color he's packed into this one piece of fruit. Here's another example. If you notice, this one's pretty orange, and the value that he's gotten in here, he's done with purples and blues. He's got a little stripe of green right here. So one way that you can create value is with a darker version of that color, but you can also create value with a complementary color. So that if you remember the color wheel that we studied, so the complementary color opposite on the color wheel of red would be green, and so that is going to create shadows. And he's also used blue and purple, and if you remember, orange and blue are complementary colors. And if you notice, the dishes, they read white, but if you zoom in, he's not used a whole lot of white actually in these dishes. I see greens, I see some gorgeous purples, I see some pinks, some oranges, and a lot of blue. And all of those colors create the value in its darkest in here between the fruit. And then if you look at the dish here, or the little picture, oh, it's just amazing. It's so inspiring to kind of look, and it's kind of most amazing to see these paintings in person, I imagine. I haven't seen this one. But if you look, he's created shadow with a lot of purples, a lot of blues. So it's super warm on the front here with these oranges and browns. And then the purples and blues and greens are what are creating the shadow. So for the supplies to grab today, make sure you have plenty of water. I have 2 printables today and a 3rd page of examples of Cezanne's paintings. So the first printable page is going to be the experiments with adding value to these apples that we're going to go through together. The second page is this little template for your own still life. You can create your own at the end, or you can use my template. That will be up to you. Grab a couple brushes. I'm going to have a medium round brush and a larger one. Of course, your watercolor, and then a surface to mix on, because we'll be wanting to mix some of our colors. I'm going to be painting on this printable that I have printed onto thick watercolor paper. If you don't have the printable or the means to print on watercolor paper, you can use any paper you want. You might just want to sketch out 3 apples to begin with, and I'm going to show you 3 different ways that we can add value to a painting. And I'm actually going to start with this 3rd apple because I want these 2 layers. I want 2 layers of paint here to dry, and I'm going to, before I do a 2nd layer. So I'm going to go ahead and do those so that they have a chance to dry, and then I'll come and do this one last. So the three ways, the first way, starting with number 3, is we're going to work in layers. In the middle layer, we're going to add some complementary colors to give the shading to the area of value that I want. So I'm going to use red and I think a little bit of orange to get the color for my apple today. What is your favorite apple? I am a fan, kind of picky about my apples. Don't like them to be too tart. I don't know. I don't know if I can even describe what I like, but maybe you can think about your favorite apple. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to cover this apple in a thin layer of color. As I showed you before, I like to do the outline, and then while it's still wet, I fill it in the middle. I'm trying to just create a nice even layer. And I'm going to do the same here. Because I'm going to use this for my experiment. It's okay if it's not perfectly in the lines. And I did provide a picture of an apple here so you can kind of see where the shading is. Of course, the place of the shading is really going to depend on your light source. So in this photo, it's black and white here because I put it in black and white, but it's color on your printable. That the light is coming from this direction, so we're going to create shadows here. So we're going to just use that as a guide. And when you sketch out something, An option is to use a pencil, with a light pencil and kind of shade in those areas of value that you see, just kind of as a guide for you. And you could leave those pencil lines. If that helps you kind of remember where those shadows are, there's a little bit of shadow here. You don't have to do that, but that's just another way that you can add to your sketch so that you can kind of remember. Because sometimes, especially with flowers that really have complicated petals, I will kind of forget where the shadows are supposed to be. So I've been starting to kind of just sketch some very light pencil lines so that I can remember where I want the shadows to be. Okay, so while these are drying, I'm going to show you the first experiment. So the first way that you can add value to a painting is by just dropping areas of color in while it's wet. So if you remember from an earlier lesson, we talked about doing wet on wet techniques. So I have red, and for my area of value, I could go with purple, I could go with blue, I could go with a little bit of green, or I could do all of them. And I'm just going to drop this color in while it's still wet. So I'm going with purple here. And for fun, let's do a little bit of green. And I might not put green straight from my pan. I'm going to mix a little bit of that color that I started with and get a more muted green. All right. I could add a little bit of blue. Okay, I'm getting a really strong shadow there. I could also drop a little bit of orange for the highlight. I could drop a little bit of yellow for the highlight. If you remember all those colors that we saw in that Cezanne painting, we are just dropping them in. I'm going to bring back a little bit more red. So that is a very wet, very kind of messy way to get value. And I would say as a general rule, you want to get at least 3 colors, 3 different colors in your painting somewhere. And of course, watercolor rules are meant to be broken, but I would say that would just be a starting point to kind of stretch you and to try to think about the different colors that you might want to include. And I think the more colors that you get in there, the more interesting that it's going to be. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. I think that I've got plenty of color in there. I'm really liking that little highlight of yellow up there. I think that maybe the brown kind of color that I mixed has made it a little muddy. So I kind of wish I had just stuck with a purple and not done that green, but it's all right. We're learning. It's an experiment. And if you don't like what you came up with on this, then just pause the video and try it again on another piece of paper. I'll show you something that I tried earlier. Here's what it looked like. Wet on wet, a couple that I tried earlier. I actually really like this, how that one turned out. All right, so now what we can do is I think that these are dry enough that I can go ahead and I am going to add, I'm actually going to start with this one. So what this one we're going to do is we're going to add some layers of color as like a sandwich. And then when those are dry, we're going to do another layer of red on the top to see what it looks like, kind of with building up 3 layers. You could do even more than that, but I'm going to show you 3. So I think what I'm going to do, kind of learning as I go, I am going to do a layer of this purple over here. Shading. Then I'm going to do a little layer of some orange right here. And then I'm going to pop a little bit of yellow in. Remember, we're trying to go for at least 3 colors. And you know what? I might even add a 4th. I'm going to add a little bit of blue up here. Go even darker, and maybe a touch of blue right there. I'm going to let that dry. And remember, this one is going to be kind of like the sandwich layer, where I'm going to do 1 layer, a second layer, and then a 3rd layer of just red. So this layer, I'm going to do pretty much the same thing, but it's not going to be sandwiched. So it's just going to be like we did before, but kind of more. And this is, this style is a little bit more abstract. There are watercolor painters that paint very realistic, amazing, beautiful work. This is kind of maybe a more abstracted kind of watercolor. And this is kind of what I favor. So I'm just adding areas of color. And if you remember in that Cezanne painting, there was like a little pop of green, and I think I'm going to add. So you see this area of shadow? And I'm going to pop in that punch of yellow as the highlight. Okay, I'm going to pause this for a minute, and I'm going to dry this layer, and then I'm going to come back and coat it with a 3rd layer. Remember the sandwich that we're creating, 3rd layer of red. Okay, we are back to do this final layer. So this one is how the wet on wet has turned out. I really like this area right here, how it's very mixed together. It's kind of a smooth layer. I had it really, really wet, which is why it's dried with that kind of line. I don't mind it too much, but I don't think it is the best for the apple. So if I was doing that again, I probably control the amount of water that I used a little bit more. It's a problem that I that I have, ongoing problem. I do like the way this one dried. It's actually really fun. It's very abstract and a little out there. It might be a little too much for some people's taste, but I think it's pretty cute, and it kind of reminds me of a rainbow. And then this is the layers. So we've got 2 layers now on this apple. We're going to add a 3rd, and really, really bright red, and try to go really bright and see how kind of rich we can get this color. So I'm going to put a thick layer of red. I'm going to make sure it's not too washed out, like a nice even layer of red. And I may even add just a touch of green to take it a little bit less brilliant green. Let's see, let's just pull in just a tad. Don't want to wash it out too much, but I know, let's see, let's add a little bit of orange to that. Okay, I like this. So let's see how this goes when we cover up these, some people call this underpainting, when you create the shadow underneath rather than on the top. And I just wanted to show you these three methods so you can kind of have them in your toolbox and decide what works for you. So this one is kind of like our sandwich apple, and I really think that's beautiful. I think it brings out a really rich color. And you could continue doing this and building up the layers and experimenting with how the depth of color that you can get. And you might want to come back and do another layer of shadow, like around, I think it probably needs it around the top of the apple. And then you could do another layer of red if you wanted. I really like the look of that. I like them all for different reasons, but I just wanted to show you these three options for creating value. And then let me know which one you liked for you, what you think is most successful. And I think it would depend on what you're making and what look you're going for and your own personal style. If you want it to look really loose and watery, you could go with this. If you're going with more abstract style, you could go with this. I think this one creates the most realistic apple. So, depends on what you're going for in the style. But here is your little toolbox of 3 ways to create value. Another way is you could shade with pencil, either after you paint or before. That's another option. A lot of people use pencil really well. Some people use ink. And you can also use colored pencils. There's like lots of layering options. In my own art, I use a lot of um, chalk pastels to create shadow and layer and value. Um, and, that's a topic for another day, but hopefully this helps you get an idea of how to do that with watercolor. If you want, now you can grab your printable for your still life, and we'll get started on this. So now you have a chance. To practice what you learned um, with the experiment that we did and create this little still life. If you can draw it out if you don't have the printable, it is inspired by this painting. I simplified it a bit for you. I thought it would be fun. I love the shape of the picture and the pretty pattern on it. So I'm going to keep this picture. I'm not going to copy it exactly, but it's going to be my inspiration. And if I kind of need to see where do the shadows fall, I'm going to be looking at that inspiration pick. So I included it in your printables so you can pull it up if you also need it for reference. Now, this painting does have a background. You could leave it white if you wanted and just do the main figures in this still life and not worry about the background. I think I'm gonna paint. Sometimes I paint the background first and then paint the figures. Sometimes I paint the figures first and then the background. I find it easier often to paint the background first. So, but I think today I'm going to leave the background till the end and focus on doing these apples in the picture and the napkin, which is kind of what we've been talking about. And again, you can paint them with whatever method or combination of methods that you liked the best. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a color of an apple and do one or two in that color and then pick another color. So I think my apples are going to be red and yellow, and maybe I'll do I want to do a green one? Yeah, maybe I'll do one green. The problem is with the green is that it will be a cool color. And then sometimes if you've got both in the foreground, if you have both a cool color and a warm color, it makes it harder to make the background pop and be contrasting, if that makes sense. So, so if you want, so for that reason, I think I am going to stick with warm color apples, either red or kind of orangey or yellow. Now, if you don't want them to bleed together, you may want to paint the objects that are not touching each other first. So you may have to kind of jump around in your painting. If you paint the ones that are next to each other, they will bleed together. You may want that, or you may want to keep them separate. I am actually going to try to keep mine separate. I'm going to try to be patient. And so I'm going to let my 3 red ones dry. And I think I'm going to move on to something that's not touching those apples. So I think I might play with this napkin a little bit. I think I'm going to make, again, we're talking about contrasting colors. So I think I'm going to make my napkin a really light blue. And then if you see in that original painting, it's blue, but it's got little bits of green and pink and peachy colors. So I'm going to do a really light wash. So I've watered down my blue a whole lot. And if you are wanting to follow along and this is too fast, just pause it at any point and take your time. If you don't want to ever feel stressed when you're painting, because stress really does come through in your painting. You want to feel calm and relaxed when you paint. I think when I am stressed, I tend to overwork the painting and do too much. I tend to not take my time and really think about the colors that I'm using. I rush things. I'm going to add a little bit. I'm just doing a little bit of wet, and then I'm probably going to come in later with some dry layers. Just kind of imagining here where the shadows are going to fall. And then the other thing that's not, my apples look almost dry. I could probably do the next ones. I think I'm going to work on a couple of the flowers that are in the vase that are not touching anything. Again, referring back to the picture, I really love this shape here. I'm going to zoom in here. Do you see that? It's like kind of purpley blue, very like light violet. So I'm going to do a little bit of And that's not, I don't want that purple, so I'm going to pull in, let's see, a little bit red. I think should do it. It's really light. And again, you don't have to follow the inspiration painting. It's just there. I think studying the masters and the way that they captured color is a really great practice to inspire your own painting and to study what they did, how they created shapes and shadow. And I think I'm going to do my other flower on the vase in yellow. I added a tiny bit of purple to that yellow because I didn't want anything super bright. So I think now that I'm ready to do a couple of my apples. I think I'm going to do these two, actually, I think I'll do these two yellow and this one like a more orangey red. I think I'm going to do really yellow just with a touch of green just to kind of tone it down a little bit. I try to mix it really well. I think I probably need to size down my brush because I think I'm getting too much water. And you can see there that it bled because it wasn't quite dry. That layer was a little bit more wet. I'm going to drop a few colors in here while this is still wet. It's a little bit of orange. I think a little bit of my green. I think my light is going to be coming this area here, since that's pretty much what it's like in the painting. While we're doing that, let's drop a little bit of green in the red. That works. Got one last apple here to do. This one's going to be more orangey. Let's do like let's drop some purpley down there because I just want that a little bit of shadow. I'm going to pause this and dry it, and then I'll be right back. All right, my layers are dry, my first layers, I'm going to go ahead and do the plate and the picture now. I think that I am going to do a really light blue. Very light. I just don't want to leave it white. I might leave some sections of it white. And I may drop like a little bit of pink in there. So I took my blue and I just really washed it out. And I'm just going to come in these areas that are dark just a little bit darker to show these areas shadow. Maybe a little bit purple in there. I'm going to do the same thing for the picture. And I'm looking at our inspiration pick and kind of seeing where those shadows might be in this pretty little picture. Okay, even leave some of it white. For some shading, I'm going to add a little bit of purple handle here. If you overdo color, you can always, this is a little tip, you can dry off your brush, with a napkin, and then just kind of mop up the water with a dry brush. It's a little trick. If you get an area of color that you don't like, you could also re-wet it and soak it up with a little bit of napkin. Let's drop a little bit of color up here, some shadow. I'm going to pause it again to dry, and I'm going to come back and work on adding some areas of value to my apples. I'll be right back. Now that we've got kind of our base layer in with some wet and wet shadows put in, I'm going to go through and use, I think I'll go color by color and just add some areas of value to these apples. And then I'll probably do like the sandwich layer that we were talking about. I'll go back in and do one more layer at the end if I think it needs it. So I'm going to start with a purple that I've mixed with some red, if you can see that kind of like a nice violet color. I don't want it to be too wet. I want to give some nice areas of shading here. I think that needs to be a little bit thicker. And I'm just going to kind of use it wherever I see it. And these ones I don't want to use as much because it's a little much for that. I'll wash it out a little bit there. And then let's do a layer of orange. Let's do, I see that like an orangey red. And if it helps you at any time, to pull up a picture of some apples to see where they're shaded, go ahead and do that. Let's do a little, I'm going to do like a green there mixed with yellow. So here. There. There. So I put it at the top of the apple. I can even add, I know I have some leaves here. Don't want to forget those. Whoops. Soak that up with my dry brush. It's going a little too fast. Sometimes I put a color down and then don't like it, so I'm just going to mop it up. I'm always trying to kind of avoid overworking it. Let's see. All right, we are back. I think what we'll do now is do a top layer to these apples. Actually, I think I was going to do a dark blue layer. I mixed a kind of purpley blue over here that I like. I just want to go one shade deeper in just a couple areas. Oh, I got a little bug friend here. There, just a little. And then this flower, just a couple shades darker. And then I think I want to use a similar color, maybe just a little more purpley blue to do some shading in this napkin. It's reading very flat right now. Just going to add a couple areas of dark where I think it's bolding. And I'm kind of following the inspiration of the Cezanne painting with it. Just a couple different tones in there. I think I might drop a little bit of blue. That blue that we were using. Super darker here. Just in these spaces, just kind of punch up that contrast just a tiny bit more. I took a break and dried everything out, and I'm going to add just a few areas under my napkin here and under my plate. Some areas of shadow in blue. Just going to pick up some of that color because it's looking too similar to the napkin to me. And I'm gonna drop a little bit of like an orangey color in the top there, and just vary the shades of the dishes a little bit more. They're just kind of too one-dimensional. And I'm gonna add a little touch of orange flowers there, maybe just a little kiss of orange there in the middle of the flower. Maybe just a little bit of green in the dishes as well. Kind of thinking about the Cezanne painting, kind of all of those different tones that he got. A little bit of, tiny bit of pink. I want it really washed out. There. Maybe a little bit of pink layered. I'm going to pause for a minute for this to dry, and then we're going to come and we're going to do the final layer on these apples, and then I think I'm going to be done. All right, be right back. So my final two steps, I am going to try to punch up red on these apples. I may not cover all of them entirely. I was looking at this and I was thinking, you know what, I really don't want to completely cover these layers that I've created. I kind of want to leave them. Oh, yeah, I think I'm going to do a layer of red on the red apples and then leave the other ones. And then I decided that I'm going to do like a really washy green background just on the top. And then I'm going to leave the white, like the white of a table, because I just don't want to lose what I have here. So let's try to get a red. You know, this is at the point. I'm almost at the point I probably need to get a different mixing tray. You know, because if you keep mixing, sometimes your colors will end up muddy if you don't have you know, a fresh, clean area to mix in. I might try a dab of purple in there. Hey, I'm liking that color. You can always kind of color test on your paper. I created this as an 8x10 so that the outside you could trim off. Okay, I've lost it there. Let's start again. I'm getting really, really low on my red here. Okay, yeah, that's more what I want. Okay, so I'm gonna take that. Go over. Let's try to get punchier red. It sparingly. Guys, I might just leave it here. This will all depend on you could completely cover these and make them a lot more realistic. I kind of like what I've got here. And I think I'm just going to leave them because I just don't want to overdo it. And since the background is okay to paint, since none of my red, except that right there, I think I'm going to dry this first and come back and then do the background and then we'll be done. Okay, I've got it all dry now, and I think for the last thing that I'm gonna do, honestly, I really love how this turned out. It's fun. I love the splotchiness of the colors. The only thing that I'm thinking that might need a little work, I feel like the napkin blends in with the picture a little bit too much. So, that might be something I could work on. Maybe adding a pattern or kind of varying the color. But I'm going to go ahead and do a quick wash on the top part of the background. And I think I decided I would do a really light green. When you're doing a background, you want something that's not going to compete with the star of your painting, which is, the apples here. So you wouldn't want to do a really, really bright red or an orange. So think of something cool or contrasting. It doesn't mean it has to be a completely contrasting color, but something that's just not going to compete. But also, you don't want it to be matchy with the greens that you have already. So I'm gonna try. Okay, I'm thinking like this greeny blue. What do you guys think of that? I think that's different than what I have here. It has a touch of the purple. And I'm going to get it very wet. And so as you can see, this is one of the reasons that you might want to do the background first, because it's just a little harder to go around. It's not too much different. I'm just going to get really wet. I'm not going to worry too much about going to the edge. And I actually want it to be kind of irregular because I want you to think of, like the wall in an old home. And it does add interest. You don't want the background to be simply just like throwaway. You want it to have some visual interest as well. If you look back at Cezanne's painting, it doesn't, the background is interesting and it has a lot of things going on. But it does it without competing for his main still life elements. So, and I think he does that with color. And okay, and I've got this little guy right, this little shape. Whoops, went over there a little bit. Pull up that. Went a little too fast. And so while it's wet, to add some interest, you could drop some purple in. If it's too concentrated, you can just add some water and let it kind of flow. You could add, I'm just pulling from some colors that I've already created. If you see, I'm just dabbing some different areas of color. You could do just something so it's not completely flat and boring. And while it's wet, it'll all kind of mix. And if there's anything you don't like, just either wash it out with water or get your napkin and kind of dab it up, or you can get your dry brush. Soak it up. Maybe a little bit of light green, yellow. Interesting. So remember earlier I said, like with fruit, you want to bring in at least 3 different colors to add interest. I would say the same thing for the background. Just add a little drama, make it a little interesting. It's very wet now. I should probably stop. Now let it sit there for a bit. Probably what I would do if this is, well, it is my painting, but if I was working on this, I'd probably let it sit for a while and then come back to it maybe the next day, or maybe a little while once it's gotten some chances to dry, and I would go back and I would kind of look at it from a distance. And if there's any area that doesn't read well, doesn't contrast well, like I said, like that napkin area that my eye is looking at, or if anything that doesn't look quite like it's standing out, then I could go back and I could add a couple more layers of paint to kind of make things pop. So that's usually part of my process, is letting it dry. You can't put watercolor up on an easel while it's wet like you could with oil, but I definitely prop it up, come back and look at it and see if there's anything that you can kind of punch up a little bit. Like as I'm looking at it, I had a great time painting with you. I hope you enjoyed that. I really like how this painting turned out. I love the colors and the value and the contrast between those warm colors and the apples and the background. And my favorite one, I probably like this one. I love the way those colors layered. That's really how I enjoy painting. I'd love to see how you complete it and how you approach this project and how you use the tools that we talked about today about creating value. One note, if you notice this paper got quite rippled as I painted because I used so much water. That's just kind of how I paint. This can be fixed, and I'll tell you how. The easiest way that I've found, of course you can tape the paper down. That's one approach. That's just always been kind of annoying to me. But I just take a towel, a wet towel, and get it slightly damp. And then just dampen the whole back of the painting and get it, you don't want it soaking wet, you just want it damp. And then I place my painting between 2 pieces of dry paper, and then I pile a whole bunch of books on top. And just as long as the bottom is flat, and you've got it between 2 flat layers, and you just want to put enough pressure on it. And what that'll do, it'll loosen the fibers of the paper, and it'll get it pretty flat. And it works really well. Sometimes it'll have a slight bend to it, and I can't completely get it out, but that is the method that works for me. And then it'll be ready to frame or gift or whatever you want to do, or just keep it in your portfolio of your experiments. And so I hope you learned something from this. I'd love to see what you created, how you did it. Drop me an image in the comments. I'd love to see. If you have questions, let me know. And any feedback you have about these videos, I'm still learning the best way to do it. And I want to hear your opinions. So thank you for being here, painting with me, and hope you have a great day.